The world of the dark web is a lawless and dangerous place where people can buy and sell anything from illegal drugs to stolen identities. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of the dark web is the world of dark web experiments, where people are paid to participate in dangerous and often illegal activities. One of the most notorious examples of this is the story of Joshua Jeffries, a young man who became involved in a dark web experiment that would change his life forever. Joshua was a struggling college student, desperate for money to pay his bills. One day, he stumbled upon a dark website that promised to pay participants thousands of dollars for completing a series of experiments. At first, the experiments seemed harmless enough. Joshua was asked to complete simple tasks, like answering questions or solving puzzles. But as he progressed through the levels, the tasks became increasingly dangerous and disturbing. One night, Joshua was asked to break into a stranger's home and steal a valuable object. He was given a list of instructions and told that he would be paid a large sum of money if he completed the task successfully. Despite his reservations, Joshua went through with the task. But when he returned to the dark website to collect his payment, he found that his account had been deleted and his money was gone. And that was just the beginning of Joshua's nightmare. Over the next few weeks, he was asked to perform increasingly dangerous and illegal tasks, like stealing cars and breaking into businesses. He knew that he was in too deep, but he didn't know how to get out. Finally, Joshua reached his breaking point. He contacted the authorities and told them everything. But it was too late. The people behind the dark website had already disappeared, and Joshua was left to face the consequences of his actions. He was arrested and charged with a series of crimes, including burglary, theft, and vandalism. He lost his scholarship and was expelled from college. But worst of all, he was haunted by the knowledge that he had participated in something truly evil. Joshua's story is just one example of the dangers of the dark web and the sinister world of dark web experiments. There have been countless other cases of people being lured into these dangerous activities and suffering the consequences. Law enforcement agencies around the world are working to shut down these illegal sites and bring the people behind them to justice. But as long as there are people willing to participate in these experiments, the danger will continue to lurk in the shadows of the dark web. The legend of the Devil's Toy Box had been circulating on the deep web for years. It was said that the site contained a video of a mysterious box, and users were dared to stare into the box for a certain amount of time. Those who completed the challenge were said to have experienced strange and terrifying paranormal activity. One young man, named Max, was intrigued by the legend and decided to take the challenge. He found the site and clicked on the video, which showed a small wooden box with a mirror inside. The instructions were simple. Stare into the box for 10 minutes without looking away. Max set a timer and began the challenge. At first, nothing happened. But as the minutes ticked by, he began to feel a sense of unease. The box seemed to be getting darker, and the reflection in the mirror was becoming distorted. Suddenly, Max heard a faint whispering sound coming from the box. It was so quiet that he could barely make out the words, but they seemed to be saying something in a language he didn't understand. As the whispering grew louder, Max felt a chill run down his spine. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. His eyes were locked onto the box, and he couldn't break free. Suddenly, the box began to shake violently. Max watched in horror as the mirror shattered into a million pieces and a dark, shadowy figure emerged from within. The figure was unlike anything Max had ever seen before. It was tall and gaunt, with glowing red eyes and long, spindly fingers. It reached out towards Max, and he could feel its icy breath on his face. Max tried to scream, but no sound came out. He was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or even breathe. The figure continued to stare at him for what felt like hours, but was only a few minutes. Finally, it retreated back into the box, and Max was released from its grip. He stumbled away from the computer, gasping for air and covered in sweat. He knew that he had experienced something truly terrifying, and he vowed never to take the challenge again. But the experience had changed Max forever. He began to see shadows moving in the corners of his vision, and he could hear strange whispers in his ear at night. He knew that the spirit from the devil's toy box had followed him home, and he was powerless to stop it. In the end, Max disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a broken computer and a chilling warning to anyone who dared to explore the dark corners of the deep web. Alex and Maria had heard rumors about the Red Room for months, but they had never been brave enough to explore it. The idea of watching someone being tortured or killed was too much for them to handle. But one night, fueled by curiosity and a few too many drinks, they decided to take the plunge. They logged onto the dark web and searched for the Red Room, following a trail of anonymous forums and hidden links until they finally found it. The site was simple, with a black background and a single video feed. They could hear muffled screams coming from the speakers, and they could see the silhouette of a person strapped to a chair. At first, they were horrified by what they were seeing. They wanted to leave, to shut off their computer and forget that they had ever found the Red Room. But something kept them watching, something dark and twisted that drew them in. As the minutes passed, the torture intensified. The person in the chair was being burned with hot metal rods, and their screams were growing louder and more desperate. Alex and Maria watched in horror as the person's skin began to bubble and peel away, revealing the raw flesh beneath. But then something strange began to happen. The person in the chair stopped screaming, and their body went limp. Alex and Maria assumed that they had died, but then something even more terrifying occurred. The person's body began to convulse, and their head snapped up to look directly at the camera. Their eyes were empty and soulless, and they began to speak in a language that Alex and Maria couldn't understand. Suddenly, the video feed cut out, and Alex and Maria were left staring at their computer screen in shock. They had just witnessed something unspeakable, something that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. But the horror was far from over. Over the next few days, they began to experience strange occurrences in their home. They would hear footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, and they would see shadows moving in the corners of their vision. And then they began to receive strange messages on their computer, messages that seemed to be coming from the person they had watched being tortured in the Red Room. The messages were incoherent and filled with gibberish, but they were enough to send Alex and Maria into a state of panic. They knew that they had made a grave mistake by entering the Red Room, and they also knew that they had to do something to make it stop. They went to the police and told them everything, but the police were unable to find any trace of the Red Room or the people behind it. The messages continued, and the haunting became more and more intense. Alex and Maria were consumed by fear, unable to eat or sleep or even leave their home. They were trapped in a nightmare that they couldn't escape. And then one day, the messages stopped. The footsteps in the hallway ceased, and the shadows disappeared. Alex and Maria thought that they had finally been released from their torment, but they were wrong. One night, they heard a knock at their front door. When they opened it, they found a package sitting on their doorstep. Inside the package was a single USB drive, with the words "Red Room" scrawled on the front. They knew that they shouldn't open it, that it was a trap meant to lure them back into the horror of the Red Room. But they couldn't resist. They plugged the USB into their computer and watched as the video feed came to life once again. This time, the person in the chair was Alex. He was being tortured in the same way that he had watched before, and Maria could only watch in horror as he screamed in agony. And then something even more terrifying happened. The person torturing Alex turned to look directly at the camera, revealing the face of the person they had watched being tortured before. It was then that Alex and Maria realized that they had been the ones being watched all along, that they had been the ones being tortured and haunted by the people behind the Red Room. In the end, they were both consumed by the horror of the Red Room, trapped forever in a nightmare that they could never escape. It was a well-known fact that the deep web was home to many illegal activities, but the black market organ trade was one of the most disturbing. People would sell their organs for large sums of money, and those in need of transplants would pay exorbitant fees to acquire them. One such person was Sarah, a young woman in desperate need of a kidney transplant. She had been on the waiting list for years, and her condition was rapidly deteriorating. In a moment of desperation, Sarah turned to the deep web to find a seller. She found what she was looking for, but the seller demanded a huge sum of money for the kidney. Sarah was willing to pay, but she soon realized that she had made a grave mistake. After the transplant, Sarah began to experience strange side effects. Her body rejected the kidney, and she was plagued by horrible nightmares and visions of the donor. She knew that something was wrong, but she was too scared to seek medical help. As time passed, Sarah's condition continued to worsen. She began to see the donor's face in her dreams, and even when she was awake. She knew that the donor's spirit was haunting her, seeking revenge for the theft of their organ. In a final act of desperation, Sarah returned to the deep web to try to find the seller and learn more about the donor. But she was too late. The seller had disappeared, and Sarah was left alone to face the consequences of her actions. The story of Sarah's transplant was just one example of the dark side of the black market organ trade. There were countless others who had fallen victim to the illegal trade, and many had suffered the same fate as Sarah. Despite the efforts of law enforcement to shut down these illegal activities, the black market organ trade continued to thrive on the deep web. It was a grim reminder of the dark underbelly of the internet and a warning to those who dared to explore its depths.